Welcome to Executive Insights. I'm Nasheen Liu, partner with the IT Media Group, a CIO-centric media company. My guest today is Veronica Millan, Global Chief Information Officer with MullenLowe Group. In this episode, Veronica shares her fascinating career journey that didn't start out in the field of technology. We also explore the topics of the role of the CIO and talent development. Stay tuned. Hi, Veronica. I'm so happy that you can join me today. Welcome to Executive Insights.
Oh, hi, Nasheen. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be having this conversation with you today.
Veronica, in our earlier conversation, we spoke about your fascinating career journey that led you eventually to become the CIO of a global marketing organization. What I found most interesting is that you didn't aspire to be a CIO or even be in the technology industry initially. So what's changed?
I think my career journey has been all over the place. So I graduated with from undergraduate with a degree in literature. And I didn't think, obviously I wasn't planning on going into technology. And I think my first job right after college, my first full-time job was actually working in the manufacturing industry. I did that, for a very short amount of time. I quickly, turned and went to another completely random industry, which was the tobacco industry, for about, 2 seconds when I realized this was not where I wanted to head into. Then I went into publishing, and that's really where my career stabilized. I think when you first do your first jobs, you're just trying to sort of land somewhere, and you don't really know where you are. And I think when I hit my publishing job, that when I was there for a couple of years, I understood then that I wanted to be somewhere closer to, maybe professional services, maybe the media, maybe somewhere around arts. Yeah, I wasn't exactly sure where it was, but I had known at least that the previous two industries were not the ones that I was interested in. And then I realized in that role that I was getting, more technical than I expected to. So I decided, I'm not interested in this. Let me try something else. And I ended up in financial services. And there is where I met this woman that, ended up being a role model for me. But then from financial services, again, I felt I was getting kind of technical and I needed to pivot. And so I decided to get my MBA. And then when I graduated my MBA, like most MBA students, you think you're going to start your own company, which, I started to. And so I did. And it had nothing to do with any of the industries I had been in before. It was actually technically in the hospitality industry. And I learned about the hospitality industry. And then I decided that wasn't for me. And I looked for work at a startup in technology. And all of this, what linked me up until then had been, this project management and running away from technology. And so it was really interesting. I finally, when I hit the advertising industry, which is the industry that I'm in now, I think advertising encompassed a lot of the different areas. You kind of, needed to be able to, start projects, work in parallel, you're not working sequentially. It really what felt like I was at home in terms of the types of projects that we were doing and how it pulled at all the different parts of me. It wasn't just simply asking me to be technical. It was, asking me to also have business acumen. It was using my languages because I speak 3 languages fluently. It was asking me to, also be an international person and to think internationally. And I had grown up, outside the United States, and I had studied in Europe. And so I had that wealth of information inside of me. It just, I had never really, found a place that used all parts of me in the way that this industry was at least asking me to do. And so I felt very much at home. And I think I finally settled in the advertising industry, even though I obviously entered it as a project manager and then made my way to being the global CIO of my agency network. But again, it just, I felt at home, and I think that definitely benefited my career. The effects of where I am today is really the result of just leaning into that and really saying, okay, I'm going to take all these parts of my interests and my academics and bring it all together.
Yeah, what you said really resonated with me and my own experience as well. I think very few of us know what we want to do when we grow up. And
Oh,
many of
absolutely.
us, just have to be open and curious about the
Mhm.
opportunities and experiences ahead of us. And through trial and error, do we eventually get on the right path or gain that sense of clarity? I also wanted to ask you because as an immigrant, a woman now thriving in a
Mhm.
highly male dominant discipline, what are your key success factors?
Yeah, and I am unique in that sense. And I'll be the first one to say that I have often been the only woman in the room. Not only as CIO, but even as I was growing up in my career. I think I had some intersecting points that probably kept me in technology, where I could have easily gone somewhere else and made me stay and then maybe even thrived. And so I give credit to running into women that were also in technology, right? And I recall one woman that I would call my mentor. I don't know if she knew she was my mentor at the time, but she was, the head of technology at the company that I was working in. And she saw, that I could do much more than what I was doing in the role that I had. And so she gave me the opportunity. She gave me work. She introduced me to project management. She introduced me to business systems analysis. She was the one that really sort of set part of my career off into becoming, PMP certified by PMI. And that to me was really what probably kept me in technology, not only having her as an example, as a role model of a woman in technology, but then also she gave me a space in technology that wasn't development, which I didn't want to do. And it wasn't like the hardcore infrastructure, setting up a data center, which was what I also thought technology was, or being in the help desk, which I knew I had already done, roles in that area. And I was like, I'm not interested in being in the help desk. So she introduced me to this whole world of, managing and implementing systems. And I was like, okay, I like that, and that I think kept me in technology, where I think I could have, if I didn't have someone like her, I might have easily switched, to a different side of the business. Once you find something that you're good at, and in this case, I think I was a very good project manager. I saw the breadth and depth, of the projects that we needed to implement. I was good at bringing people together and making sure that things were happening. Once I was able to show that set of management skills, because I do think that's a set of management and communication skills, then it's easy for people to see that you could be in management. And I think I thrived much more as a manager than I would have ever as a technologist. And I'm glad, that she directed me in that area, because then I could show off the skills that I have as a manager. So even though I might have been the only woman in the room, I might have been the only Latina in the room, I think that having found something that I was good at, most people had to then recognize, right, that I was good at what I was doing. I was getting things done. And so it mattered maybe less that I was the only woman in the room, or it mattered less that I was, from Latin America. And so it it was helpful, right, that I found something that I liked to do, because I was good at it. So yeah, so I think the key success factor there is, finding, people that are role models, which I think is so critical, right? And I think that's why I value this conversation that we're having very much. Because if you can see it, you can be it. And it sounds trite, but I think that's very true. I think it also matters, you may not even be aware of the effects that you're having as a senior level executive in the people that you're managing, beyond just simply being their manager, right? They might see themselves in you and then, believe that they can also do what you're doing. And so I think that was critical for me to see a woman in that high level technology role. And I think it's also critical understanding, that your skill set may not necessarily be, especially in the field of technology or in the department of technology, it might not necessarily be a technical skill, right? Like very often I wondered if I should become more technical. And then I realized that I didn't want to become more technical. And so I tried to get away from that technical thinking I needed to be in marketing or operations or somewhere else. But there's a lot of value not having those technology skills when you are in technology, if what you have to offer instead is management skills or administration skills or communication skills, because those are lacking in technology teams as well. And you need people that know how to manage things or people or resources. in order to have a successful team, right? So you don't have to have the best developer. You can have very good developers, some of the best of developers, but you also need people to manage them, and you need people to manage, your engineers or your other infrastructure people, or your help desk, right? And the management skills are critical in those cases. So I think that was another success factor, just understanding what I was good at, and then being allowed and being given the option to work in that field.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
keeps you.
very well said. Very well said. And I think to have that level of self-awareness is so
Yes.
important. For example, when I speak with young women trying to figure out if technology would be the right fit for them, and oftentimes they have this misconception of how,
Yes.
being in technology industry is like. And then you spoke of that as well in the early days of your career, that you're trying to figure out what you would be good at. And I think that's really important, because if we can demystify those misconceptions, that will enhance our belief system in ourselves
Yes.
and in our ability, which will drive the appropriate actions. You and I earlier, we spoke about this misconception about the CIO role. So what do you think is the biggest misconception of the role of the CIO? And how would you demystify it so that more people, especially women, will aspire to be where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many people think that you have to be an incredible techie to be a CIO. And I think today, and it's gotten, I think, better in the last probably 5 or so years, where there's an acknowledgement that the CIO, and probably because we now have a title of CTO, right? That's also in parallel with CIO, that the CIO is not necessarily the most technical person in the organization, and that's why that person is in that role, right? The CIO today has to understand the business, right? Has to understand how the company makes money, which is, critical and fundamental. Has to obviously understand the operations of the organization, and has a view into the operations of the organization, and whether I think expect it or not, also, affect the way that the operations of the company are run, because most companies today are running on technology platforms of one kind or another, right? Very few of our work today is done without technology, and to the point that technology has become so ubiquitous, we don't even consider it or think about it. And so there's this misconception that, being in technology means that you're in the help desk, or you're an engineer, or you're doing development, right? So infrastructure and application development. And there is so much more to what happens in a technology department, that I think there's actually room for many different skill sets, and not all of them have to be for people that end up with a computer science degree or an engineering degree of some kind related to technology, or even, software development, right? I mentioned project management in my background that allowed me to stay in technology without leaving it entirely, because I wasn't interested in the other three. But there is so much more today with CIOs who manage, especially large organizations, right? There's a lot of the project management, and then the different disciplines under project management, where you can have, requirements gathering, understanding, the business, translating that into processes that then are technology. There's so much where the CIO today is also involved in the front of the house with the customers and clients, developing systems for those customers, that you have to understand what the customer journey is. And that's not necessarily a technical, skill set, right? That is a more marketing, advertising, type of area, where you understand who your customer is, and then you're building your technology to support, the customer experience for your product or your service. And so all of that doesn't actually require, having a technical degree of any kind. And so there's a lot of opportunities for non-technical people to be part of the CIO group. And so I think I try very hard, right, to not show up as the most technical person in the room on purpose, only because, I want to talk about the business problem that we're trying to solve, or, the business solution that we might be, trying to create, like a new line of revenue, or whatever the case may be, because that's fundamentally, what the business is doing in the end, right? It's not really about the technology, right? And as people come into it, yes, they're going to be very technical people that love and enjoy the technical aspects of technology. And I hope that more people come into these technology departments understanding that technology is not the main factor of what can make them successful, but rather understanding the business, understanding how the company makes money, and then being able to translate technology right into those areas. And
Yeah.
I hope I feel like we've sort of crested that wave where more CIOs are seen that way, but I'm still sure there's plenty of people that look at the CIO and think they're the head of the help desk or the head of the network department or something like that. But, I think we're slowly, especially after this pandemic, we've been sort of breaking those walls a little bit and showing the true value of technology for our companies.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the pandemic has really accelerated the importance of the role of CIO and technology organization at large, and also elevated their strategic value within the
Yes.
organization. So you spoke about, making people successful in the field of
Yes.
technology, and not everyone can be a CIO or wants to be a CIO, but you don't have to be top of the house to be successful in your own career. But it's important to have the opportunity for talent development. And I think this is a very important topic for many leaders these days, especially for virtually all the CIOs I've been speaking to, and especially in the era of the great retention, to really build and nurture a culture with people first and equity in mind is essential. And I think it's no small feat to keep our workforce motivated, engaged, and empowered, even under normal circumstances, especially in this new world of potentially permanent hybrid working. So I know talent development is a topic that's near and dear to your heart, and you also have a stellar record of talent retention. So I wanted to really pick your brain if you could share some key strategies that you've implemented to nurture talent, and just some best practices to share with our CIO community. That would be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most critical thing for CIOs to understand, especially if they want to retain their talent, is to know who their people are and to understand their strengths and weaknesses and motivations, right? And I think all those are connected, because you can understand someone in terms of they're a really good software developer, but they may not like doing software development, right? So you need to say you might have to acknowledge, right, that you might lose a great software developer because they really want to get into project management, as an example, right? So yes, they might be great at software development, but they really want to they want to pivot their career, but you don't want to lose them because they're a star and they want to get into project management. So you kind of have to sort of begin to understand, who your people are and what they're trying to do with their lives and where they think their careers are heading. So I think those career conversations are critical, and then make room for that. And I tend to have a lot of conversations with my staff about, if they were technical and now they're less technical, are they okay with that, right? Are they enjoying being more of in a management and an administration role, operations role in this case, or are they missing, the technical chops that they used to have? And sometimes, you discover that, they only wanted to become a manager, for example, because they thought that they would get more money or have a better title. And that's not obviously, the reason why you make someone a manager. You hope that they're actually going to manage people and that they'll be good managers and be motivating to their staff, and they'll want to, keep pushing the team, but, rewarding them and, doing amazing things for the organization. And so frequently, even before we get to the point of a manager that's now maybe indecisive about the pivot that they just did, I try to find out even beforehand, what do you like about your role? What are you looking for? If you want to continue doing your role, can we talk about becoming a master in your role, so that they're going up in skill set, they're going up in salary, which oftentimes is also why people want to sort of grow in their roles, without having them go into a role where they might not be very good at, right? Or might miss what they were doing. And so I think it's really critical to sort of have not necessarily just a template of how people should go up in the organization or how they should grow in the organization, but more, work individually with each person, understand their motivations. If they need more money, work around, that desire to have more money. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to manage people. Can you find other ways of doing it? If they're, more junior, but they love to manage people, that might be a way of getting them into a manager role without necessarily having to go through the stages of becoming more technical and then jumping into the manager role. I think we need to erase a little bit of, that past history of saying, you start off as a junior, then you become a mid-level something, then you become a senior something, and then you become a manager. Because, if you're a senior developer, you're very technical. Where have you been picking up your management skills, right? And I think we don't do enough of that management training with our technical teams. And that is something that we try to do. I told my team this year, for anyone that was a recent manager or wanted to become a manager, let's get you to training, right? So I have a training budget. I want to spend it. Please find the training, please work. And I think a lot of what the CIO role is, and I know I answered the question earlier about what some of the misconceptions are for the CIO role. And I think actually I realized that there's another one that I spend a lot of time on when it comes to talent development, which is really, I think all senior leaders and specifically in technology should be looking at their role more like a coach. And I think, with talent development, if you're working with people on that one-on-one and you're also trying to understand them and make them perform better and helping them make their teams perform better, right? It's really that analogy of the team coach with the sub coaches, if those are your managers, and then the players are the people performing the work that are not yet managers. And I think if you think of your role as a manager in the context of coaching, you're constantly then coaching your people to perform better. And that helps also, I think, in talent retention and management, because you can then authentically say to someone that is technical, your role will fundamentally change, right? You'll spend a lot of time, yes, probably, doing a lot of administration and coaching. And do you like to coach? Do you like to talk to people? Do you like, to find ways to make them perform better, not necessarily that you are continuing to be an individual contributor?
I think I agree. Oftentimes we say as a leader, you need to listen to your people. There's
Yes.
one thing about listening to your people. There's quite another about making them feel they're actually heard.
Yeah.
It's good for someone who's great at what they do to have a stretch goal, to want to keep developing. But you may not necessarily know at the time if the path is the right path for you. So having someone who can guide you and coach you is incredibly valuable. And you
Yes.
spoke about that lady in the early days of your
Yes.
career who played a key role in mentoring and coaching you, and you're certainly paying forward by being a mentor
Yes.
and coach to many young people, especially young women. What advice would you offer to the Gen Zs?
Yes, this Gen Z generation is definitely different. They're probably smarter at their age than I ever was when I was in my early 20s. I don't know if I can necessarily give them early career advice, but what I will say to this generation, because I do think that they've some of them, especially the ones that graduated college and started looking for work during the pandemic, right, are maybe now, maybe not even yet, entering the workplace. And so I think there's one of the best pieces of advice is to really get to know who you're working with, right? Everyone that you cross paths with will give you something in return in terms of learning what it means to work in a corporation. As we all know, right, working is very different than being a student. And I think there's a lot that you can learn in the workplace on how to be, react, think about, consider, right, that you may not have ever had to do when you were a student. I think what's also important there is, and I think this generation is much more vocal about what they need. So I wish I had maybe been that vocal when I was their age. But I think being vocal is definitely what you have to do, right? And so find mentors, right? Find those people that will help you understand, the direction that your career is taking, figure out if that's really the direction that you want it to be in. And I would say, because now I think the conversation again in the last few years has been more clear about and labeling it as something, because I think it happened, we just didn't really have words for it, which is the concept of sponsorship, right? So someone who knows that they want to have, you know, their career in the corporate world, they love it, and they want to, doesn't matter actually even what discipline they're in, they should try to find a sponsor, you know, that will help them advance their career. And that to me is something that I wish I had known when I was starting my career. I didn't understand the value of sponsors, but today I understand how valuable they are and how needed. And as Generation Z, you know, starts thinking about what their next level is, if they have a sponsor high up in the organization that can actually help them transition, you know, to the next level, and gives them, you know, the guidance that they need to be successful at the next level, I mean, they're going to have such an easy time, you know, in their careers. And I think that's, you know, that'll be critical. I'm also hoping that this generation will also mean that a lot more women will have seen that technology is not just a bunch of nerdy boys, and they will want to be interested in actually joining, you know, the rest of us that are here, and not the stereotype of your typical IT person. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what these young women are going to do. They're going to change the world.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually very hopeful for this generation. I have one at home. Well, she's actually moved out already and joined the workforce last year. But I'm constantly surprised in a good way and fascinated by you know what she's telling me, and how far she's gone and what she's achieved. So yes, definitely hopeful. Well, on that note, thank you so much for this engaging and insightful conversation. I really enjoyed it and appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you so much, Nasheen. It's been a pleasure.
You've been watching another episode of Executive Insights by the IT Media Group. I'm Nasheen Liu. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please check out other content on our YouTube channel, including CIO roundtable conversations and executive interviews. And don't forget to subscribe.